Hi, folks. Welcome back. Let's talk about the modern Democrat Party, one serious institution now reduced to a therapy circle with subpoena power. These are the people who claim to protect democracy by avoiding voters, safeguard discourse by censoring dissent, and lead with compassion as our cities burn, criminals roam, and your tax dollars fund the entire chaos. And there's no greater example of this than our mayor here in LA, Karen Bass, who admits she stopped doing town halls not because of the rising crime, traffic, or wildfires swallowing up our city, but because mean words on the internet make her sad. And that's just the appetizer, folks, because stick around as we dig into the emotional support politics of the Democrat Party, where self-awareness goes to die and the only consistent principle is melting down. Starting with Tim Walz, who is one red hat away from a full-blown nervous breakdown.
Think of how easy it would be to be a damn Republican. Oh, what should I wear today? This stupid freaking red hat. What should I say today? I don't know. Just make sure it's cruel. Who do we listen to? That guy. Oh, the felon in the White House? Yeah, listen to him and that will be fine. Now he's talking about burning flags. He's going to have flag burning or whatever. Because he knows there's a hell of a lot of flags with his picture on it that are going to get burned.
Tim Walz is the male personification of estrogen, emotional, erratic, and incapable of self-regulation. His meltdown over a stupid frickin' hat isn't just cringe. It's revealing. This isn't about fashion or even Trump. It's about how deeply the Democrat Party has internalized politics as identity, emotion, and moral theater. Tampon Tim isn't critiquing policy. He's lashing out like a scorned influencer, projecting bitterness onto millions of Americans who dare to vote differently. This is what happens when a political movement trades in objective standards for vibes, where cruelty is defined not by action but by disagreement, and where burning the American flag is suddenly righteous so long as it's the Democrats doing the torching. Now, Tampon Tim's tantrum reflects a broader crisis in the Democrat Party, the inability to persuade, govern, or debate without spiraling into melodrama. It's a politics of resentment dressed up as moral superiority, and it's collapsing under its own self-righteous weight, and it's honestly beautiful to watch. And speaking of Democrat meltdowns, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson are very upset that Trump is trying to end the violent streak that's been happening in Chicago for pretty much over a decade at this point.
We cannot incarcerate our way out of violence.
Oh.
We've already tried that. And
What?
we've ended up with the largest prison population in the world without solving the problems of crime and violence. The addiction on jails and incarceration in this country, we have moved past that. It is racist, it is immoral,
Oh, come
it is
on.
unholy, and it is not the way to drive violence down.
How do you solve it then? You just let crime
we
happen?
cannot return to the same failed strategies that got us here in the first place.
No, your strategy got us here in the first place.
We requested more federal resources to address gun violence in our city.
And how would you do that?
We continue to make that same call. We have made significant progress on our own, but there is so much more that we can do if we had real support from the federal government.
Democrats are actually trying to pretend there's no crime in their cities all of a sudden, but here's a harsh truth, folks. Democrat-run cities are dominating the top 10 most violent cities in America. And by dominating, I mean it's basically all of them. The only two cities that aren't run by Democrats are led by mayors who are either former Democrats or currently caucus with Democrats. Out of the top 20 most violent cities in the United States, 18 are under Democrat leadership. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. All of this, by the way, backed by FBI data. And to take it a step further, let's take a look at Chicago specifically. Chicago had a violence epidemic for the last 2.5 decades. Almost 10 years ago, Jay-Z and Kanye West were comparing it to Iraq, literally calling it Chirac because it felt like a war zone. Guess what? It hasn't gotten any better. In fact, in many ways, it's gotten worse. And now we've gotten Mayor Brandon Johnson standing in front of cameras saying that putting violent criminals in prison is racist, immoral, and unholy. Unholy, dude? So now it's a sin to stop murderers, rapists, and gangbangers from roaming the streets? This is moral relativism dressed up as compassion. Democrats love to moralize about how incarceration is racist and ineffective, but let's take a look at the results. In the 1990s and early 2000s, violent crime dropped significantly in major cities because of tougher policing, mandatory minimums, and yes, incarceration. But Democrats now want to reverse engineer those facts by pretending jail doesn't deter crime, all while violent assaults, carjackings, retail theft, and homicides surge across their jurisdictions. And here's the reality, folks. Democrats are not pro-law and order. They are the party of crime, and that's why you see them up and down the ballot defending criminals. They just finished defending Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a literal human trafficker who beat his wife. Democrats across the country spent months fighting to bring this man back to America after he was deported, just so he could end up being deported to Uganda anyway. This is the kind of compassion that gets women killed and communities gutted. All that being said, let's get specific for a second because nobody can argue with data, right? So in 2023, Chicago recorded over 650 homicides, more than New York and Los Angeles combined. Carjackings hit nearly 2,000. Police staffing is down by over 12%, and response times for high-priority 911 calls average more than 9 minutes. That's after Brandon Johnson cut millions from police overtime and publicly supported the idea of non-police first responders for violent incidents. This isn't just failed policy, folks. It's ideological warfare against public safety. When leaders like Johnson talk about the addiction to incarceration, what they're really addicted to is deflection. They blame the federal government, structural racism, or vague historical forces, but never their own policies, their own rhetoric, or their own budget cuts. They act like cities became violent in spite of their leadership rather than because of it. The truth is, Democrats' soft on crime policy, rooted in critical race theory, abolitionist ideology, and anti-police activism, has devastated urban communities, especially Black and Latino neighborhoods. These aren't academic theories. They're real lives, real victims, and real blood on the streets. So yes, it is absolutely justifiable for Trump to send in the National Guard to Chicago. When a city becomes incapable or unwilling to protect its own citizens, the federal government has not just the authority, but the obligation to step in. We're not talking about over-policing peaceful communities. We're talking about restoring basic order to neighborhoods under siege. This isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about justice, safety, and truth. And the truth is, if Democrats want to run on the platform of incarceration is racist, then let them do it. Because the American people are watching, and they're not paying the price for this delusional experiment in lawless compassion. In fact, they're on Trump's side in Chicago.
This is a good thing. I think that the governor as well as the mayor should be on board with it just so we can get a bit more of security in Chicago the way that we need.
The crime has dropped since 2024.
Has
Do you
it?
feel like the city feels safer?
No, not at all. No, especially with the police being defunded.
And there you have it, folks. Straight from the mouth of a Chicago resident. You can't make this stuff up. People are literally begging for help in their communities. They want safety. They want security. They want something different than what Democrats have been offering them. But the media, like CNN here, keeps pushing this narrative that crime is down because that's the official Democrat line. What they won't tell you is that most of the so-called drop in crime comes from recategorizing it out of existence. Look at California. They reduced penalties for smash and grabs from felonies to misdemeanors under Prop 47, and the stores were getting looted nonstop for years. Then came Prop 36, which passed to reverse some of that. But what did the Democrat-controlled legislature do? They refused to fund it. To this day, it's not fully implemented. This isn't just incompetence. It's a deliberate strategy to maintain an ongoing crisis. And I mean, it's so obvious. Just look at New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, who literally proposed eliminating most misdemeanors as part of his platform. What happens when you do that, huh? Crime skyrockets, police back off, reporting drops, and now statistically there's nothing to see here, folks. So Democrats can manufacture a crisis, cause endless suffering, especially in the marginalized communities they claim to protect, and still say their policies are working because you can't point to data that no longer exists. It's not just dishonest, it's profoundly evil because they're not just avoiding responsibility, they're deliberately rigging the system to prevent any meaningful accountability while expanding state control and silencing their opposition, all under the guise of progress, which is really just Marxism, let's be honest. And you know that Trump's strategy of sending in the National Guard to these failing Democrat cities is effective when you have mayors like Brandon Johnson, Muriel Bowser, or like here in Los Angeles, Mayor Karen, just having full-blown meltdowns that, for once, we're getting law and order here instead of the chaos that Democrats love to wallow in.
I've spoken to both mayors recently, Mayor Bowser as well as Mayor Johnson in Chicago and Mayor Lee in Oakland, talking about how we are going to respond to this federal overreach. I did describe Los Angeles as being a petri dish because
it's a federal overreach now, huh?
This was the first experiment. Washington, D.C. was number 2. Chicago is next. And in my opinion, this is a way of getting the American public to accept military intervention.
Oh, shut up.
Because after a while, it becomes normalized, and people aren't surprised to see soldiers on the streets. This is terrible because our military is not trained to do crowd control or crime intervention. It is a misuse of our troops. It's extremely inappropriate, and I would question whether or not it's a violation of our Constitution.
You will be hard-pressed to see Mayor Karen do anything about crime ever. We've had a nonstop wave of smash and grabs here in Los Angeles for literally months. Groups organize street takeovers, those dumb car drifting circles at intersections, and then just walk into nearby stores and loot 3 or 4 of them in a row. The police do absolutely nothing. Why? Because the LAPD has been gutted. They're so severely under-resourced that they can't even respond. Just yesterday, in an entirely different city, we saw a clip out of Oakland, Barbara Lee's district, where 500 people showed up for one of these dumb takeovers, and the police didn't send anyone. Why? Because they only had 16 vehicles on duty. That's all it took, folks. 500 people to completely destabilize law enforcement in a major American city. And LA isn't far behind. The LAPD has lost roughly 2,000 officers in the last few years. In 2020, we had around 12,000 police officers in a city of nearly 10 million people, already an absurdly low ratio. Now it's down to just over 10,000. And if current trends continue, that number could drop to 8,000. And that's why in certain areas, precincts don't even open until 9 a.m. anymore, and some close by sundown. Think about that, folks. Crime doesn't stop when the sun goes down. But in parts of Los Angeles, neither does the ability to report it. I've sat in community meetings and heard it straight from residents. They've called for help and no one came, not because police didn't care, but because there was literally no one available. The LAPD is short-staffed. They're forced to prioritize crimes, which means if your situation doesn't make the top of the list, you're just out of luck. And this isn't just anecdotal. According to the 2024 California Department of Justice report, the statewide clearance rate for reported crimes is a dismal 16%. That means 84% of crimes go unsolved and typically unprosecuted. In LA, the numbers vary. Homicides are solved around 70% of the time. Violent crimes around 40% of the time. And property crimes, well, that's less than 15%. The result is a silent epidemic of lawlessness. And now, when the federal government tries to intervene, when D.C. finally gets involved after years of local failure, the same Democrats who defunded their police and let their cities rot suddenly start screeching about constitutional violations and troops in the city. They frame federal support as an authoritarian power grab, but in reality, it's a response to their own total abdication of responsibility. What you're watching here from Mayor Karen is a long con. Starve law enforcement, redefine crime out of existence, block any outside help, and then cry tyranny when someone actually steps in to restore order. It's not about protecting citizens. It's about protecting the political narrative. Democrats like Mayor Karen, Brandon Johnson, Barbara Lee would rather let their cities burn than admit their ideology has failed. They've created a crisis they can't fix, and now they want to block anyone else from fixing it either. That's not leadership, folks. It's sabotage. And the people of Los Angeles, Oakland, Chicago, and D.C. are paying the price for all of this, which, let's be real for a second, it's intentional. All by design. They want this perpetual crisis because it's the way that they usher in their Marxist utopia. It's the way, the excuse they have to expand their government power, to keep us divided. Don't fall for it, folks. These people don't care about you. They go on TV and pay lip service about your community, about your interests, but at the end of the day, they're career politicians who are only looking out for themselves.
I want them to know that I am an Angelino, born and raised here, and I'm going to do anything and everything I can to fight for it, to defend my city, and to make sure that we have the best quality of life possible.
Well, that's rich coming from the same woman who's allowed Los Angeles to descend into chaos time and time again, offering absolutely no real solutions, just more press conferences, photo ops, and the usual screeching about how Trump is the real threat. Mayor Karen saying that she'll do anything and everything to protect this city from federal intervention is absolutely laughable, because the only thing this administration is protecting is its own image. The federal government stepping in is not the first move. It's a last resort. It means local leadership has failed completely. And let's be clear, that's exactly what's happened in Los Angeles. Our city has been bleeding out for years. We're not talking about isolated issues, folks. We're talking about systemic failures across every layer of city governance. And it's never been more evident that the broader issue here is purely ideological. Democrats like Mayor Karen are far more invested in maintaining narrative control than public safety. They frame any federal involvement as an authoritarian power grab while conveniently ignoring that they've spent years dismantling local institutions. They cut police budgets, decriminalize offenses, eliminate cash bail, and then act shocked when crime spirals out of control. They call it compassion, reform, equity, but it's just abandonment. Abandonment of the working class, of small business owners, of anyone who dares to ask for basic law and order. Now when someone like Trump steps in and says enough is enough, they try to flip the script. Suddenly it's a constitutional crisis. Suddenly he's the threat. No, he's not the one who let homelessness explode, or who let cartels operate in broad daylight, or who made it normal for Angelenos to wake up to break-ins, needles, or human waste outside our doorsteps. That's you, Mayor Karen. That's your legacy. So no, Mayor, you don't get to claim the moral high ground here. When the federal government has to step in, it's because you've abandoned your post. It's because the residents of this city have suffered enough. And if you were truly committed to protecting Angelenos, you'd welcome every ounce of help you could get instead of treating your failure like a badge of honor. And by the way, folks, in case you're curious to see just how hypocritical Democrats can be, one day in the news, Mayor Karen was saying that she bleeds for Angelenos. She's here for the Angelenos. And then the very next day on a podcast, she says this.
What I used to do is I used to do town halls all the time. And I love that public engagement. Town halls are a little more difficult now, though, not having anything to do with this year, but just having to do with the nature of public discourse now.
What an absolute gaslighter in chief this lady is. It's got nothing to do with this year. Are you kidding me? It's got everything to do with this year, Mayor Karen. This year, accountability finally came knocking on Mayor Karen's door. Up until now, people were pointing fingers at the federal level, understandably, because we had open borders, rising inflation, and lawlessness flowing straight to Biden's White House. But now that there's some level of order federally from Trump, the rot at the local level is getting exposed. And where is that rot more visible than here in Los Angeles, where the crime is out of control, traffic is a nightmare, homelessness is just getting worse by the day, wildfires have destroyed entire communities, and basic services are collapsing. This is Mayor Karen's backyard, and it's burning. But instead of facing it, facing us, she's decided to retreat into a bubble and blame the nature of public discourse for why she won't do town halls anymore. Which is rich coming from someone who just moments ago was claiming she's fighting for Angelenos and doing everything she can for the city except talking to the people that apparently she represents. Everything except standing in front of the residents who live with the consequences of her policies, right? Look, this isn't even about tone. It's about discourse. It's about accountability. It's about the fact that Mayor Karen doesn't want to sit in a room with citizens who are angry, frustrated, and rightfully tired of being ignored. Because now that people are paying attention to what's happening locally, now that the distraction of federal chaos has receded, these city leaders are exposed for what they are: inept, unprepared, and more committed to narrative control than the actual leadership that they were elected to do. But what's truly astonishing is the victimhood in display here. Mayor Karen paints herself like she's under siege, like it's just so emotionally difficult to listen to the public's concern. Bro, I mean, lady, you're not a victim. You are the mayor. And if it's too hard for you to face your constituents in an open forum, maybe it's time for you to resign. You signed up to lead, not to hide. You want to stand for Angelenos, then stand in front of them. Get your ass into a town hall, not curated questions, not media-run Q&As, no friendly crowds pre-screened by your staff. Show up, face the people, because we are done with these stage-managed performances disguised as engagement. Town halls should be mandatory once a month for public officials. Open mic, real-time Q&A. And I've been to some of these events, like one with, State Assemblyman Nick Schultz, and I can tell you, They are completely sanitized. You couldn't get a single critical question in edgewise. Every concern was a softball. Every answer was pre-scripted. That's not democracy, folks. It's just straight up PR. This moment, all in all, says a lot about the Democrats' current grip on public discourse. They champion dialogue, equity, and listening until the voices get inconvenient. Then it becomes toxic, unsafe, it's too difficult. They've created a culture where any challenge to their authority is framed as aggression, where frustration is labeled as hate, and where leaders no longer feel obligated to show up in person unless the environment is perfectly controlled and curated. And that is not how a republic is supposed to function. Elected leaders answer to the people. And if they're too fragile to do that, then they should get the hell out of office. So the question is, how much longer are we willing to tolerate leadership that hides behind press releases and curated sound bites while our cities crumble around us? How many more times will we let words like discourse and equity be weaponized to deflect from basic failures of duty by Democrats? At what point does civic engagement mean demanding real answers, not just applauding the illusion of them? If Democrats can't stomach unfiltered voices from the very people they claim to serve, then what exactly are they serving besides themselves? These aren't isolated incidents, folks. They're symptoms of a deeper rot in our institutions where comfort has replaced courage and image has overtaken impact. You don't need to agree with every policy to recognize cowardice when you see it. And maybe it's time we stop accepting narratives designed to pacify us and start asking who they're really meant to protect. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.